Okay, we're going to begin with this class. This is the Interpreting and as Analytical Linguist, lecture number 1 before the break. You should all have a course syllabus that is a one-page course syllabus like this. And those students who are online already downloaded that course syllabus, hopefully. The students who are online also downloaded the class material. Students who are here, you will be getting your class material per week. In other words, every week I'll distribute it to you. It's the same, but for online, basically what we are doing is we're putting it all together under the lecture. As most of you online can probably look at it, and it says lecture such and such, and then the material that comes afterwards. But for students who are on site, we're going to distribute it every week. This is a really fun class, and of course, this is a class for anybody who wants to work as an analytical linguist. I would expect that many of you have already gone through the recruiting session with Medlang, and you're waiting for the background check. And if that is the case, this class is one that you really have to complete, okay? Without it, it's going to be very difficult to going through all this hassle, and then towards the end, if you have not completed the class, then they will probably, most likely, almost certain, will not accept you. Now, the class is very different than any other interpreting or translating class that you've taken here. This is a much more relaxed class. There are no quizzes except some occasional homeworks. The idea behind this course is for you to learn what an analytical linguist does, and then I will leave some homework, which I will grade, and it will count as a quiz, but I'll leave some homework that basically will be to listen in your lab a particular wiretap conversation, and to actually do the job as analytical linguists do the job. And the same thing will be for online. Online students, you'll be able to forward any of those assignments to me directly, so I can check them and then send them back. First of all, we need to understand what an analytical linguist is all about. And many people, the title is very misleading, because you're not a linguist by definition. Is somebody who has has gone through university and has gone through the linguistic department, and it's very, very different than what this is all about. This is a fancy title to basically say somebody who speaks 2 languages, in your case Spanish and English, but who can not only transfer that, but can analyze the message. And that's very different than what we have been doing in court interpreting or in any other type of interpreting, because in any other type of interpreting, your opinion is irrelevant. In this analytical linguist job, your opinion may be relevant. And what I mean by that is that sometimes you hear a wiretap conversation, and incidentally, we're going to hear one today after the break, because we are actually going live. This is actually broadcast live, and I don't want to play any wiretap tapes here that's live. I don't want to do that, even though we created them here, but I don't want to do that anyway. But basically, what a wiretap is actually it's the recording of usually, most likely, a telephone conversation between somebody that is involved in some type of drug dealing, for example, weapon trafficking, illegal alien smuggling. It depends for what agency of the government you are involved in and that particular project. It's most likely will be even not, it doesn't necessarily have to be a drug trafficker. It could be a drug dealer, somebody who it sells drugs and is involved with that particular, illegal activity. So the analytical linguist will hear the message, and usually will be in Spanish. It will always be in Spanish. And when the analytical linguist hears the message in Spanish, has to put that in writing, following a certain format. And the way you're supposed to write that, to follow that format, what is known as the protocol, is something we're going to see in a few minutes. But when you hear a message, sometimes the message has some other meaning behind the words. Let me just give you an example. Let's say that I am talking to you and we are involved in some drug transaction. And I say, for example, nos encontramos en el parque y yo voy a llevar a mis 3 hijas. Tú llevas a tus 2 hijas para que jueguen, ¿verdad? Sí, claro que sí. That sounds very fine, nothing wrong with it. But these 3 hijas could mean 3 kilograms of cocaine, and 2 hijas de él could be $220,000 or $200,000. So there are code words. There are certain things that imply something else besides the word itself. So those code words, you need to learn them, because otherwise when you go and do the job, you have no idea what they are. Now there is a protocol as to how you can give some input to the person that is asking you to transfer this conversation into English. And we're going to see how that exactly works, who that person is. You can give some, there's a protocol in terms of how you give input to that person. Sometimes you may not know, so you leave it the way it is. But the bottom line is that you should know. And you should know and state what it says in the original, but also indicate what you think it means based on the message. Because this is not only an exercise of transferring words from one language into the other, but also transferring concepts and ideas and cultural issues. For some people in Latin America, maybe certain words could denote certain things. So there are some code words that we're going to be learning here so that you have a better understanding of what they may be talking about. So an analytical linguist, it's not really an interpreter. It's somebody who absorbs a message and transfers that into the opposite language, either verbally or written. If the transferring is verbally done, it's not necessarily word for word, but it's close, but it is sort of explaining to somebody what this conversation is about. If it's written, it's much more accurate. So it's very informal. The register of the vocabulary is extremely low. You can expect a lot of drug terminology and so on and so forth. And of course, weapons as well. Things that have to do with illegal alien smuggling maybe as well. But one of the characteristics of an analytical linguist is that the message sometimes have to be in written form. Whereas when you are taking a class in interpreting, you really don't write anything. It's all verbal. So I told you that you will convey the message either verbally or in written form. If you have to convey that message in written form, following the format that we're going to be learning in class, we're going to look at the essentials of that format today. But we will continue elaborating on that in the future class, next class. If you are going to do that in written form, you really need to write. And obviously, and you need to write either into English, and you may also need to write in Spanish. The reason why you need to write in Spanish is because the message is in Spanish, so you need to do a transcription of the message. So as you hear something, you have to transcribe it. And we're going to look at what that means and how this is done. I'm going to give you an example of how this is done, who are the parties involved, where you do this job and all that in a few minutes. But the one characteristic of this class that other classes really do not have is that there is a written component here, or there has to be some instruction in terms of written in Spanish as well as in English. In English, you have a way to maybe use the word processor or whatever, or to change things. So you're usually, in our experience, you're much better But in Spanish, sometimes you miss the written accents, you spell things incorrectly. So this class has 2 lectures out of the 9 lectures total that deals with those issues and specifically to the job. It's not like in general, it's specific to the job. The type of vocabulary that you will hear and so on and so forth. So it's very, very specific to the job because the 2 lectures do not intend to correct all your issues with grammar in any way or manner. But they intend to correct the necessary syntax so that when you do the job, you don't make any mistakes. Why is that so important anyway? Because the work that if you're asked to prepare a transcript, that transcript may go to federal court. And if the transcript is in Spanish and it has very poorly written words in Spanish without accents, it will be challenged. And if it is challenged, it's going back, and eventually you're going to get out of a job. You won't have a job. So it's very important that you pay attention to the syntax classes and you do all the homework. Some of you probably will have no issues with that, but it's not a bad idea to see how that syntax is applied to your actual job. So it's going to be a very unique type of class. You won't find it anywhere else. In fact, this class is the only one that is taught in the nation. So you're pretty privileged in that sense because you're taking this class the first time we're offering it. You're the first students who are taking it. And it's going to really raise the level of analytical linguist with time. But you will be the pioneers, so it's pretty exciting. At least it should be for you. So we will be talking about all that today. And I will talk about the job and I'll talk about a lot of things during the first half of the class. And the second half of the class, we're going to listen to some wiretap conversations, one of them at least. And we're going to discuss it. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to give you some homeworks that you will do here and so on and so forth. Students who are taking this class online, please be aware that during class time we do practices here. And the practices are not like regular interpreting practices. They're practices where I will play a wiretap conversation, and then I will ask the class to do the job as they usually do it in the federal building. Because the wiretap conversation, I play it only maybe once or twice or 3 times. Sometimes instead of actually giving you, hearing the wiretap, I also give you the script of it. But then with that script, then you will create the necessary summaries and transcripts. So let me just give you an example of how this is done and why your job as an analytical linguist is important. There are a lot of things that are actually being wiretapped when there is a court order, obviously, dealing generally with drugs. And when you start with, when they catch one person, or they don't catch it, but when they identify one person, this person may be connected to another who's connected to 2 more, and this is connected to 3, and this other one is connected to another 3, and we can see that after a while, as the investigation progresses, you end up with a lot of people involved in this. The analytical linguist is always asked, or the idea for you is to always follow the same person in that network. So if this is the network that we're going to call the ME network, whatever that means, and this has to do with drugs, I'm going to assign an analytical linguist for this guy. And then there will be another analytical linguist for this and this and this. And during this whole investigation that can last 2 years, you're following that person. That's why when you work as an analytical linguist, one of the main things that they want is for you to work, if at all possible, 40 hours a week. Because if you work only 3 days, then you can't really follow a same person. You have to actually split it with someone else. That tends to create some inaccuracies. So when you actually do the job, when you're hired and you start doing the job, you will be in a particular network, in a particular investigation that can be carried out either by the DEA, for example. That's very typical. You're going to be in charge of this person, A. And every time his phone rings or he lifts the receivers to make a phone call or whatever, that is recorded. And that is recorded in a central unit, and you will have access to it from your own office. The office is nothing else than a sort of a cubicle with a computer in a federal building, or it could be in a train station or in an airport, in anywhere where the federal government has the facility for an analytical linguist to actually analyze wiretap conversations. You do not take the wiretap home, neither can you access the system from home. This has to be done in a particular location, and in some instances you're even searched. You cannot take anything out of that location, neither can you bring anything that relates to the case. I mean, certainly you can bring your book and all that. You cannot talk about the case with anybody. Because you don't know if you go to a party and you talk to a person there, and that person, you're just talking about what you do, and that person knows the one that you're actually I guess, following. We're going to call it following. So you go to your, but who actually wants to know this? Well, if this is a drug-related case, the DEA will be involved because this is at the federal level. And the DEA will have an officer assigned, many officers assigned or agents assigned to this network. And maybe this is more like internal. Maybe, I don't know, but maybe one agent is in charge of this, another one is in charge of this. We don't know. Sometimes you work with more than one DEA agent. The agent knows that there is the person lifted the receiver to make a phone call, and if it's in Spanish, he or she has no way of knowing what that phone call is. It could be, ordering a pizza, but even that could be a coded word. So when you walk into your office at 8 o'clock in the morning, you will have a list of wiretaps that you're supposed to listen to. They are supposed to follow these people 24/7, meaning that sometimes the wiretapping and the analytical linguist response is real time. As you hear, you tell the DEA agent what it is. When they are about to go and arrest people, a couple of days before, they don't have the time for you to create all this, do all this protocol. You can do that later. We can record the conversation and do that later. But at this point, what we want to do is let me know what's going on. Is there someone else involved here? Because if there is, we have to arrest that person. And so this is where the verbal portion is. Here is you're for example in your office with a DA agent next to you, and the DA agent is telling you what is going on. Listen to it and tell me what's going on. And you know a lot about the case because you have been following this person. So sometimes the conversation is, well, he's gonna really do a big sell tomorrow afternoon out of his home, and this is what he's saying, and this is what's happening, and the DEA agent will then say, okay, good, do the written portion because we're going to need this later on in court. Because when the DEA agent arrest the individuals and then present the evidence to the prosecution, that written material that you're going to be preparing will be incorporated as part of the evidence so that the federal prosecutor can determine whether this is something that merits, this person should be arrested. In fact, what they do is they present that evidence to the grand jury so that the grand jury looks at the evidence and determines whether there is sufficient evidence to return an indictment. Once the case goes to federal court, then the prosecutor, the attorney, the U.S. attorney that is representing the U.S. government will decide what evidence has to be submitted in the trial. And that evidence will have to go through a certified federal interpreter. So maybe the same tape that you transcribed is going to go to be used as evidence, but your version is not allowed. The version that is allowed in court is the one that was done or is done by a federal certified interpreter. So occasionally, well, almost always the federal certified interpreter gets your version because you have done the job already. So it's important that that what you do, the way you write, the way you prepare these different things that we will be talking about, the written portion, I call it, that you do that in a way that it makes, it's accurate, okay? Because otherwise it could be challenged before evidence is presented for a trial. There could be a motion to suppress that evidence for whatever reason. One of them could be it's not properly transferred into the opposite language. So when you work as an analytical linguist, which of course you work 8 hours and you have different shifts because they work 24/7. And obviously some shifts you don't do a lot of work because from 12 midnight to 8 a.m. maybe there's nothing going on live, but there's probably a lot of wiretap conversations that took place the prior week, maybe in the afternoon, and you have to do some of those as well. So it's not that you're going to do everything live necessarily, but you're going to be doing most likely wiretap, or the written portion of the wiretap will be always of the same individual. You follow that individual throughout the case. How difficult is it? It's not too difficult if you know what you're doing. How long does it take to do that? It takes a long time. For 1 minute, it will probably take you close to 8 hours, a minute and a half, maybe 4 hours. I don't know, it depends. It depends on what it is. Because you have to get an accurate transcription following a certain format of that wiretap conversation. And 1 minute you're going to have to play like 60, 70 times to get all the details, because sometimes it's very difficult to know what the person is saying. And then after you have done that, then you have to do other things, clean up here, clean up there, and then do all the transfers, so it really takes a lot of time. Now, we said that your job is really to either provide verbal information on what the wiretap is about and or written information. So you have two possibilities here. This is you now, and you can provide a verbal information of what's going on or a written information of what's going on. Verbal is common. Say, for example, you're in your office or in your cubicle, and the DA agent comes in and said, there was a conversation that took place, a wiretap we have from yesterday at 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. And I want to know what's going on. Can you play it? And then you go to your system and you get it and you play it. And the DA agent can hear it, but it's all in Spanish. So as you hear the DA agent, it depends on the agent, will tell you, okay, just tell me what's going on. It's not, usually they don't tell me word for word what's going on. Just tell me what's going on. And they say, well, he's making a phone call asking for, 10 invitations for her daughter's birthday, and then you can make your opinion based on the pattern from this individual. It sounds like he has used this before, indicating that this means 10 kilograms of cocaine, for example. And he said that he's going to send Mario to deliver the invitations, which based on the pattern here, usually Mario is the one that is the mule, so he probably is going to take it. And then you're giving your opinion as you are actually saying. Some DA agents will say, I don't want that opinion, just tell me exactly what's going on. So you have to adapt to the different DA agents. The reason why you will work with one or more DA agents, because sometimes a DA agent is in charge of more than one potential, criminal, if you want to call it that way. So the verbal is quite informal, and we will do a lot of those here, okay? But there are two ways you will do this verbally. if you do it at the same time as you hear it, you may be able to hear it, and then the DA agent is next to you, and then you basically tell the DA agent what's going on. But because of the exchange, because these are just few words said by one person, a few words by the other, it's very, very quick. Sometimes the DA agent will tell you, just listen to the whole thing and let me know what it is. So now you have to take notes in a particular format so that you can easily identify what each party is saying. So it's like a whole consecutive now that lasts 1 minute with a conversation between two individuals. So that calls for a type of note-taking very different than the note-taking you learn in court interpreting. Because in court interpreting, you're concerned about accuracy. Here, you're concerned about key things in each of the segments, okay? So sometimes you listen to the whole thing, you take your notes, and then you tell the DA agent what that is all about. Now, one interesting thing, the DA agent will then say, okay, let's listen to the next one. When he made another call 10 minutes later, let's see what happens. Or he may tell you, look at all the calls that he made yesterday from 2 to 3, and let me know later on. I'll come back in a couple of hours and let me know what actually is going on. So you need to keep your notes. And the notes have to be so clear that you can read them later on, because you don't want to play the tape while he or she is there. So it has to be very specifically done, and of course, it takes a different technique. It's very different than the technique you will use for a consecutive in a court of law, because this is not about word for word again, it's about messages more than anything else. So that's sort of the way this is done verbally. But then there is also a written part to this, associated with this. After the DEA agent listens to you, or actually you give him or her your sort of rendition of what happened in this particular wiretap conversation, the DEA agent may request that you prepare a summary, and sometimes even prepare a transcript. If a particular wiretap is marked for summary and transfer, that's going to be done in written form. And to do that summary and transcript, you must follow a certain protocol. Otherwise, nobody will understand what you're saying. You cannot do it or prepare something in a way that is not clear, particularly in the summary. What exactly is a summary of a conversation? A summary of a conversation is something that you will prepare that will begin, what is that? Excuse me. That you will do, that you will do, and you will write on top of the page, summary of the call. You will underline it. And then the first thing you're going to say is, who is this person calling to? Now, this person is Jose Perez, and is he calling or receiving a call? That's the first thing you have to tell the DA agent. Is that an incoming call or an outgoing call? And usually the way you do this, if you are calling a particular individual, so we'll say, for example, call to Rodrigo Lopez. That will be the first line. And if the Rodrigo Lopez is calling, so then it will be answering Rodrigo Lopez's call. So it's either call to or answering. Okay? Now, when the person who called, if a call is made, call to Rodrigo Lopez, that's not a problem. You know who he's calling. Sometimes the person that you are following, lifts the receiver, makes a phone call, and you don't know who he or she's calling. Because that person is a new participant, or simply because you just don't know. And in that conversation, there is no indication of who this person is calling. So in that case, you will say called to, and now you have to say, use an acronym, unidentified, and then you have to tell me whether it's male or female. So let's say an unidentified male, which in this, as an analytical linguist, abbreviate this with UM, unidentified male. If it's an unidentified female, it's UF. So you will say call to an unidentified male, or simply call to UM, capital letters. If the person is answering the call, the one that you're following, okay, the one that you are responsible for, is receiving a call from unidentified male, so it will be answering a call from UM. Okay? Let's say that this person is Jose Perez and is receiving a call from Rodrigo Lopez. You know who he is, okay? When you write this summary, the summary should be written in such a way that it is extremely clear who is doing what in that conversation. When you put this in paper, you will say, for example, Jose Perez answers the phone, okay? And then you will say, instead of doing a word-for-word thing, you say Jose Perez answered the phone and tells, or told, if you want to put this, answered the phone and told Rodrigo Lopez that the invitations are on the way. So that's sort of the first message. So in any conversation, in any dialogue, you have something that is said by one person, Jose Perez, por ejemplo, and then the other person reply, Rodrigo Lopez. And then there's Jose Perez again, and then Rodrigo Lopez. The summary is for you to somehow summarize what that is, that segment. What did Jose Perez say when he initiated the call, if he made that call to Rodrigo Lopez? So let's say the original says, for example, hey, bueno, Rodrigo, ¿estás ahí? Okay, that might not be a message necessarily. What value does it have for a DA agent? Are you there? I mean, this is not a transcript, it's a summary. So you will say, Jose Perez initiated the call, okay? And then it will say, Rodrigo Lopez, let's say that now Rodrigo Lopez answers like that. Pues mira, no he recibido las invitaciones. So then it says, Rodrigo Lopez told Jose Perez that Rodrigo Lopez had not received the invitations. You cannot say Rodrigo Lopez told Jose Perez that he did not receive the invitations, because I don't know, the DA agent doesn't know whether that he refers to the first one or the second one. So you have to be extremely specific. So one way to say that is Jose Perez, which you can usually use the last name, okay, told Rodrigo Lopez that he, and then within brackets you say Rodrigo Lopez had not received the invitations, or the 10 invitations. That's a summary. Now it sounds more like word for word. You can eliminate some of these things. You can say Jose Perez told Rodrigo Lopez that he, and then you open the parentheses or the brackets, Rodrigo Lopez didn't receive the 10 invitations. Okay, you have a lot of flexibility in how to put this. And this, of course, this particular sentence in your summary will correspond maybe to what Rodrigo said to Jose in the second line. Maybe the first line is, hey, ¿qué hubole? And then Rodrigo Lopez says, so the first line always is initiated by the one making the call. That's a giveaway. Okay, usually the one that makes the call initiates the conversation. So he says, hey, ¿qué hubole? And then Rodrigo Lopez says, oiga, mire, lo que yo estoy llamándole porque le quiero decir que no recibí las 10 invitaciones. You don't have to say, hey, look, I'm calling you because I did not receive the 10 invitations. You do this in third person as an observer. So you will say, in this case, you will say, Jose Perez told Rodrigo Lopez, if that's what Jose Perez said, or whatever. In this case, if it says Rodrigo said that, you can say Rodrigo Perez told Jose Perez, or Rodrigo Lopez told Jose Perez, blah, 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 blah. And you have to be specific about who is doing what, who is saying what, who is receiving or not receiving what. The key thing is who, when, why. Who, when, why. The 3 W's. Sometimes you can put the where too. Who, when, why, where. These are the things you want to include in your summary. Who, when, why, where. These are things that everybody wants to know. Okay? Who, when, why, where. So the 4 W's. Who, when, why, where. You're going to find this to be extremely difficult at first because your training up to this point is about word for word. It's not about reporting what you hear. So we're going to do practices here to that end. Now, in this summary, the summary has to be written, obviously, in English. And the format that you need to follow with this summary, it's very, very, actually, the protocol is quite informal. Not that the transcript has a lot of formality, but the protocol for this summary, it's pretty informal. And what is that protocol? Well, you put anything that it's your personal opinion, you put it within those brackets. So that's why when we said, in the previous one, it says, Jose Perez told Rodrigo Lopez that he, and then you put Rodrigo Lopez, or Jose Perez, I don't know, had not received it. So that's sort of your comment. Because sometimes to you, when you hear it, it's clear who received and who didn't because you can hear the voice. But when people read the summary, the voice is not there. So you have to be specific about what you hear. The voice identifies the individual. You know the one that you have been following for quite some time, that person, you know his voice very, very well. But for the other person, you don't. So if the other person says, mire, no recibí las invitaciones, you need to state who is saying that. You can't just say, look, I did not receive the invitation. Because in the summary, you don't write who is saying what. In a summary, you just really write a summary, each sentence, and I will give you samples of it after the break. You write everything you hear, but in a sentence. So the summary is not like, here's this one, this is what he said. This one, this is what he said. This one, this. This is a transcript. A summary is sort of your opinion as an observer of what you heard. Very different than what you have been doing here. So in this summary, the protocol is for you to write anything that has to do with your opinion as a linguist, or anything to clarify, we call that clarifiers, have to go within those brackets. And a clarifier could be, for example, unintelligible. You may hear, for example, let's say this conversation. You initiate the conversation, you being the person that the linguist is actually concentrating on, and then I receive the call. And as I receive the call, you, the linguist who's here, monitoring everything, can hear that behind the scenes, there is someone else telling me on this side something. And, it's in the background. That has to be put on paper. So you will say, for example, an unidentified male is talking to, let's say, Rodrigo Lopez about something that is let's say, an unidentified male is talking to Rodrigo Lopez, and then within brackets you will say unintelligible. You just don't know what it said. You play that part of the recording 1,000 times and you cannot hear it. That needs to be there. Sometimes what you indicate here has to do with your personal opinion. Like, for example, José Pérez, let's say José Pérez is telling Rodrigo López, no recibí las 10 invitaciones. Okay, so you will say, for example, José Pérez told Rodrigo López that he, that is José Pérez, did not receive the 10 invitations. And now you know that because you have been following José Pérez, and you know that when he talks about invitations, he's talking about amounts of drugs. So here you wouldn't put the drug, or because you don't know, but you will put referring to a quantity. And what that means within brackets is that you, because you have been following José Pérez for such a long period of time, you know that whenever he uses the word invitation, it's really talking about the quantity of something. So we say referring to a quantity. We don't go as much as saying referring to drugs. That's just too much. But when the DA agent reads referring to a quantity, he's going to come back and he's going to pay attention to this and see quantity of what. Sometimes they say, for example, mira, me fui a comprar 4 llantas. That sounds like, so let's say I'm José Pérez and I'm telling you over the phone, me fui a comprar 4 llantas. So you'll say, José Pérez told Rodrigo López that he, parentheses, José Pérez, close brackets, went to buy 4 tires, open brackets, referring to quantity, and then close parentheses or brackets. So this is actually the regular format that is used. Now sometimes there might be two unidentified. Let's say that it is an unidentified male that it is actually answering the call. So here I am, Jose. What is my name? Jose Perez, and I'm calling somebody that nobody knows who he is. So the conversation is, oiga, ¿cuándo viene? Okay, so then you will say Jose Perez told asked the unidentified male, and that identified male has to be within the brackets, right? So you will say Jose Perez told the unidentified male, or ask the identified male when he, the unidentified male, was coming to see him, and then you will say Jose Perez. You see how I'm very specific within brackets who I'm talking about? I don't say Jose Perez asked him when he was coming to see him, because we don't know who him is here. So you say Jose Perez asked the unidentified male when he, the unidentified male, was coming to see him, parentheses, Jose Perez. Is that clear? Okay, this is extremely important. One rule that you should use, the summary is done, if you have time to review the summary, one of the basic rules that you will use when you're reviewing the summary is to see whether you have a he or a she or an I or something like that, and next to it you don't identify what that he, she, or I, that pronoun refers to. If it doesn't identify, if that pronoun is not identifying anybody, that calls for you to go back and review it and identify who is he, who is she, who is I. Okay? That's extremely important. Yeah, question?
I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself, but what about when they use like el güero?
The question is, what about if it says el güero? If you're calling el güero, if it says, for example, Jose Perez, that's me, and I say, está el güero. So you will say, Jose, but of course, you're calling now a number, somebody that you don't know, an unidentified male, so you'll say, Jose Perez asked the unidentified male where el güero is. That's it. You don't transfer it. If I say, for example, if you have a nickname or an alias for a person, you use the nickname or the alias. So when you hear any type of wiretap, there is a basic rule that you must follow. Number one, identify the parties. What that means is it do you know the names? and only based on what they said, not on what you think. And if you have heard already, you know the party that you're always working with, you always know Jose Perez's voice. But if you hear that Jose Perez is calling Alberto Rodriguez and you have done this before and you have heard his voice, but it's not identified in this thing, you will say Jose Perez is calling an identified male, and then you open say possibly Alberto Rodriguez. Possibly. You don't never say Alberto Rodriguez. You are never certain. So what you want to convey based on your prior experience of the case, you want to put it on written form, and you use those brackets to actually indicate whatever you put here is your opinion or a clarifier. If it's your opinion, it will be very clear, possibly. But if it is a clarifier, will be an identified male and an identified female. Now, sometimes there could be two unidentified males on the other side of the call. So we have to be careful, right? For example, I am Jose Perez, I initiate the call, and an unidentified male answers and then transfers me to another unidentified male. So the first one is called unidentified male 1. And the second one is called unidentified male 2. So the rule is, if there is only one unidentified male in the conversation, you don't need to say 1. The only time that you put a number to it is when there are 2 or more. And the same thing is true for an unidentified female. So that the identification of the parties is extremely important. Don't expect that a conversation will be between only 2 parties. There could be 3, 4, 5. There could be a conference call, right? So you got to be very careful with that, all right? Now, if somebody from this network, where is it here? Where is it? Ooh, wow, I talk a lot already. Okay. If somebody from this network A is contacting B, and you are the analytical linguist for A, and there's another analytical linguist for B, those reports are going to be compared, those summaries. You both heard the same conversation. The only difference is that for you, you will basically start with what your party did. Jose Perez received the call. Jose Perez made the call. For the other analytical linguist will be Ana Rodriguez received the call, Ana Rodriguez made the call. But the way that the interaction, the summary itself will be identical. This happens a lot. Okay? So you got to be very accurate. So step 1, when you hear this, when they're asking you for a summary, identify the parties. That's the famous who. The next thing you want to do is, and you don't start writing the summary right away. You take notes and you basically write down, okay, so for example, let's say Jose Perez and an identified male and an identified male 2. So I listen to that wiretap, and those are the 3 voices. Okay? Now the next thing that I'm going to do is, or that you're going to do, is you're going to try to figure out why the phone call was made. Okay? What is the main purpose of this phone call? Is it to sell drugs? Is it to buy drugs? Is it just for another purpose that has nothing to do with drugs? I don't know. You won't put it in the report, but you have like your sheet of paper on the side that you have this ready, and you put that and you say, for example, so that's the who, and then you say drug sell. That's the why. Okay? Then the next step is when, if it was disclosed. Sometimes it is not disclosed. If it is not disclosed, you put a 0 like that and you say when. That means that you don't know. If you know when that takes place because of the conversation, you indicate Monday. Now, if they say Monday, which Monday? We don't know. So it will be ambiguous. You will say Monday. If you think based on prior, let's say that Jose Perez makes a phone call 5 minutes before to Mr. A. And he says in that one, sí, nos vemos les voy a enviar el cargamento de, qué sé yo, de iPhones, ¿qué quiere decir drogas en ese caso? Se los envío al lugar de siempre y lo voy a enviar el lunes a la tarde, ¿ok? Okay, so that one is specific. Este próximo lunes a la tarde o el día cualquiera, 10 de noviembre a la tarde. Now, if he now makes another phone call to another person and doesn't disclose that, but it says, sí, se lo envío este lunes, you can put 2 and 2 together. And it says, y el señor A va a estar ahí. Then you put 2 and 2 together. So in the summary for the second call, you will put a comment as an analytical linguist with the brackets and saying, possibly, the word is possibly, Monday, November 10th. And when the DA agent reads that, will come to you and say, why do you say that? And you will say, well, because he made a prior conversation or a phone call, and that's what he said, but not in this phone call. So you're providing the DA agent as much information as you can, but always with room for doubt, okay? Because remember, you are following that person. That DA agent is really not following the conversation because he or she doesn't speak Spanish. So you're sort of an extension of the DA agent. If the DA agent were following a conversation in English and always following Mr. Richards, whatever, always following that person, and that person spoke English, then the DA agent will know exactly what Richards is doing, Mr. Richards is doing. But because now the person is Jose Perez and speaks Spanish, the DA agent cannot follow that. But you can, and you followed him throughout, maybe for a couple of months, so you already know how he expresses himself. You already know how he uses those coded words. Not at first, but as the case progresses, you will know. And you need to share that with the DA agent in the summary only, not in the transcript. The transcript is accuracy, is what we're looking for. Summary is your opinion with what you heard. Okay? So the first thing is identifying the parties. The second thing is the why the phone, so is the who. The second thing is why the phone call was made. The third thing is when that will take place, if you know it. And of course, where. So if they say, for example, at LAX, then that's where. If you don't know, if they don't say it, then you just put a 0 like that. This is your sheet of paper. You don't share this with anybody. And after you complete your summary, you destroy this paper. If you take this out, you could be arrested out of the federal building. Okay? Very, very important. If you monitor somebody that you know that person, it just happened, let's say you're following Jose Perez, and suddenly he's calling your daughter, your own daughter, and you know your daughter, you know her voice. Jose Perez mentions her name, they have a conversation, and they are talking about dealing drugs in whatever, somewhere. You must disclose that. You must disclose that to the DA agent and tell the DA agent, look, this is the conversation. You create the summary as you always do, and then you talk to the DA agent and you say, this is what happens. I can't be involved with this particular one because they're talking about my daughter. There have been cases where they didn't disclose that, and that person, the analytical linguist, was arrested 4 or 5 years in federal penitentiary. This is not a joke. This is extremely serious. That's why it takes 9 months for your background check. It's lots of fun, but there are some things that must be followed in a certain way, because if you don't follow it, it's not like they're going to fire you. They may arrest you. Okay? So you're going to be extremely careful what you do. And really the easiest way is disclose anything, any conflict. Don't take anything home. Don't bring anything there. And certainly do not disclose what you hear. That's the end of it. It's as simple as that. Question?
I just, out of curiosity, then what would happen in it is your own daughter, you can't say it with your daughter either to stay
Yeah,
away
if it is your own daughter, the question is, can you say that to your daughter to stay away because she's contacting somebody who is a drug dealer? And let's say your daughter doesn't even know. The answer is no, you cannot.
you just kind of have to let it play out, even if it's
You have to let it play out. You can always talk to the DA agent. See, the DA agent is like, for court interpreters, the judge. He or she is the one in charge of this. So if you have that concern, you'll say, look, I realize that my daughter is contacting this person. What are my obligations? What's my duty? What can I do and what I cannot do? I would love to advise my daughter that but they will not let you do that. You have to let it play out. It is, but let's hope that doesn't happen. So you prepare your sheet of paper with this information, and then you listen. So you listen to this. Maybe you listen to that 45-second conversation or a minute conversation because they're all pretty short. Maybe you listen to prepare this. You listen to this one maybe 4 or 5 times, and then you listen to the conversation again and trying to create the summary of the call, okay, which we are going to see. I'm going to show you a couple of summaries later on. But again, the summary states, summary of the call on the top, call made to whoever, to an identified mail or whatever, or call received by Jose Perez from whoever, an identified mail. And then you start analyzing. That's the analytical portion of it. Each thing that is said by the first person who speaks, the second, the third, the fourth. Now, when you don't know who initiates the call, let's say you're the first time doing this, and you don't know who initiates the call. Let's say that you're not following it. Let's say that you're always following Jose Perez, but somebody in that home lifts the receiver and makes a phone call, and it's not Jose Perez, and the DA agent wants you to actually create a summary for it. You don't know. So you may have to say, an identified mail number 1 initiated the call, and identified mail number 2 received the call. So now the one that initiates the call is unidentified mail 1, and the one who receives the call is unidentified mail 2. How do you know who initiates the call? The one that talks first. That's usually the rule. Very rarely, if somebody calls you, I mean, they're going to talk. Otherwise, what are you going to do? It's very, very common that the very first. So those are tips. But if you're not sure, you will put within parentheses possibly initiated by an identified mail 1.
Sometimes, on TV, I've seen that, like, if I'm calling you, I dial your number, you answer, but I don't say anything, although I'm the initiator of the call.
The question is, sometimes if I'm calling you, you won't, I don't say anything, and then the other person answers. But you see, when you actually hear a wiretap, we're going to do that after the break. You're going to hear that the one that is answering, the tone is lower than the one that it is initiating the call. Because the wiretap is on the phone or on the line from the one that initiates. So it's going to be very clear. You'll see that's the experience, the skill.
if it's a wiretap like home phone and you said anybody can ask, or if it's a child, you put boy 1 or.
If it is a child who initiates the call and the DA agent asks you to prepare a summary for that, then you will, if you don't know the name of the child, you will say boy number 1. Yeah, you can, if it is, what you're trying to ask me is whether the age can be also disclosed, and you do have to state that. You can say unidentified, if it's a child, you can start like saying unidentified male, and then within brackets it says possibly a child. Okay, and that's good. Because what you're saying, this is what it is, and possibly it's a child. Now, because you don't know if it is a child or if it's a boy, maybe only because of the tone of the voice, maybe. Okay? Any questions on this? So then after that, you will see in, let's see if I have it here. I may have it here. Not really. Okay, I'll show you later on one sample of it, of a summary of the call, okay? when you look at a summary of a call, when you prepare the summary of a call, this is summary of a call, for example. It's only maybe 6, 7 lines, and the call is probably 45 seconds. At no time when you look at a summary of a call, okay, like the one I have here, it's just written from left to right with the periods. It's like if you were writing an essay, a letter. Okay, it's not like one and then you indicate what that person said, and then the next one and indicate what that person said. It's not a transcript of it. It's not word for word. Sort of a general summary. Okay, it is sometimes if you're asked to prepare a summary and a transcript, which is unusual, but it could happen. It could happen. Those ones are easier because instead of starting with the summary, I strongly advise you that you start with the transcript. Because once you have it in written form, it's much easier to create the summary. Because if you create the summary from hearing, it's much more complicated than comparing something in written and writing it in a summary form, following a format. You're going to do so many of those practices here that by week number 9 or 10, you will be able to do summaries without thinking. That's the purpose of this class. So when you start working, you just basically become efficient from the beginning. Otherwise, it usually takes 2-3 months for somebody to actually start doing this. It's not easy. It's not natural. So if they ask you to prepare a transcript, what is the rule regarding the transcript? Now, the transcript is much more formal, so there are certain things that there's much more formality. We're going to see both of them together, samples of a transcript and of a summary of the call. Well, the first thing you're going to write down is transcription. And if they ask you for a transcript, they're also going to ask you to provide the translation. So usually it's transcription/translation. Now, the first thing you're going to put here is the case number. There is a case number assigned. Then you're going to see what is called target. The target is who. Okay, so I'm Jose Perez and I initiate a phone call. If I initiate a phone call to Alberto Rodriguez, the target is Alberto Rodriguez. Okay? So you need to know what it is. The reason why I'm stopping here is because just give me 1 second, please. Sometimes the target is always the person that you're following. So you need to check with once you start working because there are two different ideas about this. So when you start working, you have to find out what do you mean what the target, because they're going to allow you to shadow somebody for a couple of days. When you write a transcript and do you write target, and if you do, what does it mean to you, to your company, to your protocol, internal protocol? Is it the person that you're following, you're always monitoring it, or is it the person who's receiving the call? So we're going to leave this as a question mark. It depends on the company, because you were interviewed by Medlang, but there are about 57 different companies in the US that does this. It's not the only one. And they all have a slightly different formats, okay? Then the target phone number, of course, the target phone number is, again, we're going to leave a question mark, because if the target is the one that you're monitoring, and then it's the phone number of the one that you're monitoring it. But if the target is the one you're monitoring is calling, then the phone number is the one that you're monitoring is calling, actually, that phone number. There is a call number that is going to be in your computer. It's going to say what call number it is. The computer registers the number of calls made from that line from a period of time. You don't have to be concerned about that. It could be number 43, I don't know. Then you're going to have what is called an incoming. And the incoming usually is the phone number where the phone call was made. So it's the phone number where the call is made from. Okay. Then you have a date. Then you have the time, and you have the participants. You have to list the participants. And in that case, if you have Jose Perez, so you write Jose Perez first, Jose Perez, and then you can write unidentified male 1, unidentified male 2, and unidentified female. Okay, there are 4 participants. Jose Perez, a guy that I don't know who he is, another one who I don't know who he is, and a female. And then your name, the transcriber. Your name. Okay? Then after that, you have to write what we call legend. The legend that you're going to use in the transcript. Some of these things might change slightly depending on the company, okay? But I would say that 85 to 90% of what I am explaining right now applies to all companies, particularly with the one that you interview. Legend. Okay, you put it like that on the page, and you put brackets like that, and you say brackets are used to separate the transcribers / translator remarks from the original words spoken. So brackets are used to separate the transcribers / translators remarks from the original words that were spoken. So you have to specify that so that they know. Then you have this, a you / I. It could be unidentified or unintelligible. And unintelligible because of what? Because of the diction. You know, some people speak like this. Well, claro, I don't know what he's saying. You know, and when it's recorded, it's much more complicated. So that's something you want to put that as well. Then you have a PH like that, which means phonetic transcription. I don't know, you know, what he is necessarily saying because he used a word in English in the conversation, and I really don't know what that word is. So I transcribe it as it sounds. I put it in italics, and then after that, I make my comment. Brackets, PH, close bracket. That means phonetic transcription. Okay? Phonetic, it's just the way it sounds. Like if I say, for example, yo estaba trabajando con el forklift, and you don't know that it means, he didn't say forklift. So you put forklift in italics, and then you put PH next to it. It means I am actually, the fact that it's italics is because it appears to be a different language. And the PH is basically stating, I'm writing what I heard, but I don't even know what this word is. Now, if you think this is forklift, you could say possibly, because then you can add that. Referring to a forklift. You can do that too. Here you have a transcriber or translator's comment twice. One, telling you that this is a phonetic transcription, and the second one is what you think that phonetic transcription refers to. If you don't. Yes?
I mean, that's only if it's unintelligible, right? I mean, if it says forklift,
if it says clearly forklift, you just leave it as forklift. But you put it in italics, because if the conversation is in Spanish and they use a word that is in a different language, it's going to be most likely in English, it has to be in italics. But then it will not be phonetic transcription, obviously. Question on this? The other one that you need to put here is SIC. And basically say written or transcribed from the original, from its original, comma, even if it appears to be a mistake. And this sometimes has to do with syntax, grammar, or sometimes, let's say, for example, it says, at the beginning of the conversation, it says, vamos a tener la fiesta el lunes por la tarde. You know that something is going on Monday afternoon. And then something else, they talk about something else. And towards the end, it says, recuerda que la fiesta es el martes por la tarde. So you will write martes por la tarde, but then you're going to write down this, and then next to it, you could say possibly referring to Monday, not Tuesday. But then you don't know which one, possibly, because maybe Tuesday is the day. You don't know, right? Okay. Yeah.
What exactly SIC though stands for? I know they usually mean.
Yeah, I don't know. SIC, yeah, it's like basically says carrying out, keeping the mistake. But I don't know where that, it's probably Latin, I'm not sure. Now, then at the very end you will say words pronounced in English within a portion of the. No, this is something else. It's not part of the SIC. SIC ends right here, okay? Then this is like a comment. Leave a space here, right? Leave a space. And this is another comment. It says words pronounced in English within a portion of the transcript, or the transcription rather, that is predominantly in Spanish, have been or ITALICIZED, idolize side, I don't know how to pronounce it, or vice versa. What it always you're saying is that if it's a word in another language, if the conversation is held in Spanish and the word is in English, it's going to be in italics. If it is in English and it's said in Spanish, it's going to be italics. Maybe the conversation is in Spanish and the word is in French. It's not very rarely, but it could happen. Then it's going to be in italics as well. Then at the very, okay, so what you're going to see, that's pretty much the main thing. So when you look at a page for the transcript, it's going to have this. It's going to say transcription, translation, okay, all that, transcription, translation. And then it's going to have that thing, case number, blah, 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 that we talk about it, up until transcribed by. And then it's going to have the legend, which is what I indicated here before. And then it's going to have that one that says words pronounced in English. And that's the cover page. Okay, that's going to be your cover page. I'm going to show you an example of it today. Don't worry about it. Those of you online, you probably already downloaded, but if not, that sample is underneath the player where it says material distributed in this class. But you probably downloaded because it's part of your material anyway. Just go to lecture 1, and it's going to be there. Now for you, I'm going to give it to you in class. This is for people that are online, okay? So I'm going to give you a sample summary and a sample transcription. Now, that's just the beginning. That's the cover page. Okay? That can change slightly, but then the question is, how do you actually do the transcription of a tape? Well, the format should be as follows. Okay? You're going to divide this into maybe 3 columns like this. You're going to put the name of the participant there. If it's an identify male, it will be UM1. So let's say the first one is, okay, so let's say the first one is Jose Perez. So you put Jose Perez. Let's say the second one is an identify male. So you got to put, because it's an unidentified male, and this is your comment, really, it's your comment because you're really saying it's a male and I don't know who he is. So it has to be within those brackets. And then here's going to be the transcription. And here's going to be the translation. The third column is the translation. Now the transcription, this is extremely important, begins where the phone begin when the wiretap begins. And very often, the first thing that you hear is that the phone is ringing. You have to put that, and you have to put it, you know, maybe nobody's saying that, but very often it begins like this. Let me give you an example. You have all this, the party, the transcription, and the translation. So this is name, transcription, translation, okay? And then the first thing, nobody's talking, but the phone is ringing. So in this case, if the original is in Spanish, this, whatever you write here, like whatever you write over here has to be everything in Spanish. Whatever you write over here, column has to be all in English. So everything that is on the second column here is in Spanish. Third column is in English. So if the phone ring, you may probably put, and you're hearing it, but it is not part of the conversation, so it has to be within the brackets. So you'll say, for example, timbra el teléfono. Okay? So you write timbra el teléfono aquí. Timbra el teléfono. Okay? Let's say that as the phone is ringing, you can hear some noise in the background from the person that is making the phone call. Or, you know, when I say timbra el teléfono, it doesn't mean that your phone is ringing, Jose Lopez's phone is ringing. It's the other phone that is ringing. You understand that, right? When it goes, doo, doo, it doesn't mean the ringing. Okay. And then maybe on the side of Jose Lopez, there are kids playing, so there is noise in the background. So you'll say, ruido al fondo. Okay? So you specified everything you hear within brackets. Sometimes the person making the phone call is addressing somebody else. So we have all these different scenarios that we're going to see here throughout this class, how to properly handle those cases. There are so many possibilities. And then what you're going to do is you're going to put the name of the person, like Jose Perez, for example, and whatever he said in Spanish. And then the other party, the unidentified male one, and whatever this person is saying, and then, and so on and so forth. When you use the legend that I gave you is all in English, particularly the PH for phonetic. So this column here, the second column has to be everything in Spanish, even those comments. So you wouldn't, if you write, for example, it says, voy a mandar al guachi a que haga esto. Guachi, what the hell is that? So you say guachi, you know that is definitely a word that is not English. But you write it the way it sounds, so you will write this F-O-N, fonetico, okay? Because when you transfer here as wachi, it's going to transfer as PH, okay? What we don't want is to have anything here that is in English, unless it was said by the person who you were monitoring. We want the English on the other, in column number 3. Even your own comments have to be in Spanish. So, for example, let's say that there are voices that overlap. Then you will say voces sobrepuestas or superpuestas in this column. But on the other one, it will say voices overlap. So we're going to see all that with examples, all right? So once you do all this, you basically do this, you know, word for word, listening to the wiretap and writing it down. Now, 1 minute conversation to prepare this can take at least 2-3 hours. 2 hours, 3 hours, sometimes an hour if you're lucky. But it depends on the conversation. Sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's not clear. You know, you get, for example, to... aquí, tengo uno dice aquí, ¿por qué no me manda el guachi para allá? And then you hear, what the hell is he saying? Wachi? Does it mean watch out? So you listen and you decide this is wachi. So I write it phonetically. And then it says, para que, no sé si le hayan dicho a usted, hayan is incorrect Spanish. It should be hayan. That's why you need to know Spanish syntax. So you will say hayan, you will write the word hayan, okay, parentheses, SIC. SIC is in both languages because I think it comes from Latin. So it means I wrote it down. I know there is a mistake, but I wrote it down because that's how it was said. Okay? And then after that, then you finish with the transcription. Now, in the summary, I forgot to say one last thing. Unfortunately, I forgot. When you write the summary, so that's the transcription. When you write the summary, remember that you write summary of the call. Summary of the call. and you write call to and the person, and then you write your summary. At the very end, you put EOC, which means end of call. End of call. I apologize, I forgot to mention that. It's a small detail, but you should really put it at the end of the summary. Okay. No, this is in the summary of the call, the summary of the call, not the transcription. No. In the summary of the call, you create your participants who and all. That's your, no, those are your notes. Then you create your summary of the call that should look like this. And then once you finish, you put EOC. That's telling the DA agent that's where the call ended. In the transcript, you don't have to because you're transcribing word for word. So they know when it ends, obviously. So if they ask you to do a summary of a transcription as well, it is preferable, and if they want you to submit both at the same time, to begin with the transcription first. Because once you have the transcription, it's much easier to know who the parties are and all that stuff. But most important of all, it's much easier to create a summary. We're going to do practices here as well with that. Okay? But sometimes they ask you for a summary of the call first and then the transcription, because you submit the summary of the call now and the transcription 2 weeks later. In that case, there is no need for you to do the transcription because you don't know if they're going to ask for it, so you have to just only do the summary of the call. So in this class, you're going to have to learn how to do a summary of the call by itself, or how to do a summary of the call when they order a summary of the call and a transcription. And in that case, you start backwards. You start with transcription, and then you go back to the summary of the call. This is the basic protocol for these two elements, summary of the call and transcription. Okay? Now, we will be taking a break in a couple of minutes, and the live session is going to end for those of you who are watching us live at this moment. And there are some people watching live. I'm not talking about the online students. The online students, obviously, we continue with that. But there are some, this is also broadcast, this was broadcast live in our website, and that's finished now, or it's going to finish pretty soon. But for people that are taking this course online or here on site, when we come back from the break, we're actually going to hear wiretap, and I'm going to give you a summary and a transcription for that wiretap. Those students who are online, that you will find that, I'll identify it to you under lecture number 1 material, or in the class manual, it says lecture number 1. And what we're going to do is, you're going to listen to the call first, then I'll give you the summary. Then you're going to listen to the call and correct the summary because the summary might be incorrect. We're going to work with it here in class, okay? And also online. Then we're going to discuss it, and then I will give you the transcript, and you're going to listen to the summary of the call, follow the transcript, and see whether that is actually accurate or not. So in other words, the first thing you're going to do is identify any mistakes. Okay, instead of start writing it or preparing it, I want you to be confident. So that way you're going to see the format that is used, and you just identify some minor mistakes. In some cases, the mistakes may not be minor, okay? So we're going to do that after the break. Any questions? All right, so let's take this a break now. This ends lecture 1 before the break for the Interpreting as Analytical Linguist course. Thank you.